Well, good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today for this next presentation brought to you by Freelance Business Week, Tampa, Kansas City. And I'm pleased to be your host today for this session. And I'm pleased to bring on screen with me Amanda Herring. Amanda Herring is a Chief Experience Officer for an organization called Living HR out of the Tampa Bay area. Good afternoon, Amanda. How are you doing today?
Hi, Kevin. I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you. And we're so excited to have you with us today. I was just sharing with you when we were not yet in broadcast that our last presenter, Julie Cortez, who is my co-host with our day here, represented by Tampa and Kansas City, the two Super Bowl contender cities, that your presentation just segues nicely from hers. She talked about, she's a freelance rock star. She talked about sort of the business side of freelancing and so on. But one of the slides she put up caught my attention as a great segue to this one. That is about the fact that, you know, freelancers feel like they have to always be on 24/7. And, you know, we're people too. And so we have to take time to ourselves, and we have to know what those boundaries are. So we're very much looking forward to your presentation. And without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and pull myself off of the broadcast stage here, and I'm going to pop your presentation up and take it away, Amanda.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kevin. I am getting a really crazy feedback situation, so I'm going to turn myself down in my ears. But I am so excited to be here with you all. I hope your freelance business week has been going well. Congratulations on investing in yourself this week, learning and growing and connecting with one another. And a very happy Earth Day. My presentation just so happens to pair very well with that theme today. So I'm going to roll with those good vibes. But as Kevin mentioned, I'm Amanda. I'm Amanda Herring, Living HR's Chief Experience Officer. And I'm super excited to be here and to talk together today. So Living HR is an agency built to humanize work. And so we're really a team of creatives, strategists, HR and culture professionals, and DEI experts, and more, who come together every single day to help reimagine inclusive cultures, optimize talent, and humanize our experiences together. So at the core of what we do every day is really just try to make work better for the many humans like us who work most days of our lives. We've been doing this since 2009 for clients across the globe and have always done so with a really, really dogged focus on humans at the center of work. In the past year and a half, the world has started to catch up to that approach, embracing that a more humanized and empathy-driven way of working together, no matter the industry or discipline, is the real and only way forward. So we have clients in manufacturing, in tech, in healthcare, in logistics, local, regional, global, progressive or traditional, and everything in between. And what they all have in common right now is that they are engaging with us and our organization with this renewed focus on caring for their employees as whole people. And so today we'll be talking about well-being and boundaries from that work experience point of view, which is something that I am really excited to do. All right, so I am going to start with this very daunting question. Caring with ourselves as whole people, when we think about well-being, starts with questions like this. And so I'll start by asking, how are you doing? And, you know, really asking that question, asking, how are you? And actually stopping to think about it. How have you been doing? How's the whole work-life blend for you personally? What feels hard lately? What feels good? Are your projects fulfilling? Are you feeling fulfilled as a whole human being? And this is often a really tough question to answer as an employee, as a leader, just as a person, as a business owner. Even before the now times, so many of us would treat this question as a very perfunctory thing and just say, oh, I'm good, how are you? And then just move on. And it became this question that actually meant nothing in our normal day-to-day and the way that we talk to each other. Yeah, exactly. Most people just say, I'm fine. So as humans, we have this natural tendency to keep things moving, especially if we work for ourselves. Pushing past whatever is in our way is just really natural, even if that thing is small talk. And it includes important questions like this, because we're the makers of our own success, and ultimately we're really focused on getting our work done. So we have, very thankfully, as a society, been examining and chipping away at that hustle culture that's really dominated the way that we work for such a long time, especially in the US, and redefining our idea of success. However, stopping to ask ourselves questions like this is still undoubtedly difficult to do. And that's really fair, because there's a lot baked in this question. There's a lot going on in the world and in our personal and professional lives. So, how many of you have thought about, read about, talked to friends about, Googled yourselves the state of work, the state of unemployment, remote work, burnout, well-being, words like this over the past year and a half? I'm imagining all of your hands are raised at your computer screens right now, or you're nodding at me in some way. And so that is something that is not surprising based on what's been going on in the world. Some factors impacting our well-being as people right now definitely include those key terms. We know that 1 in 4 Americans are reported to be currently working remotely in 2021. And by 2025, it's estimated that 36.2 million Americans will be working remotely. And that's an 87% increase from pre-pandemic levels. Thank you, Tessa. Your hand is raised for being a Googler, I'm sure. Remote work may not be all that new to you as a freelancer, but that's a gigantic shift in the way we work in a broad sense of all workers in society. And so what that staying power of remote work means for freelancers and independents is that for your clients, most are not considering back to work fully in person. For now and for the future, most of us will work remotely in some sense. Our clients, I know they're talking to us and telling us that they don't anticipate a return to the old ways. And at least some of their teams will remain either partially remote or fully remote for the foreseeable future. So we've also seen that in this new, more open approach to workforce planning, that growth for companies has expanded even more to consider freelancers and contractors versus full-time headcount, which may be part of why around 12%, it's estimated, that the US workforce began freelancing for the first time in 2020. There are probably some other factors in there too. But generally speaking, you're a more safe and sound investment in turbulent times, which could include right now. So in many ways, and there's one comment here, in many ways, corporate employees who work from home are experiencing the freelance culture. That's very true. Yeah, there are definitely some crossovers in work from home. We're dipping into your freelance way of life quite a bit. So what this really does is create an interesting space for freelancers and independents. To the point of that comment, it starts to redefine what a worker looks like. It's no longer butts and seats and time cards and visibility equaling management. Even the most traditional industries are rethinking their workforce planning, which really creates more opportunities for freelancers and independents to become a more natural part of the workforce. And it even evens the playing field in terms of culture and the way that we work to a certain extent. You may be working just like every other team member, using the same tech and tools to get the work done. And there are quite a few positives to remote work, but this trend also creates some potential pitfalls for well-being and boundary crossing for you for many reasons. It's easier to anticipate work-life blur. There's a bit of an easier scope creep that could happen when you feel even more like a part of the team, things like that. So your relationship with organizations is potentially a little bit less cut and dry than it's been in the past. And you are at higher risk for your boundaries being crossed because of that. So we know that when your boundaries are crossed, it can lead to something you've likely heard a whole lot about lately, which is burnout. And we know that burnout is currently at some all-time highs across the US and across the world. And we know that through quite a few new studies being done and just the state of feedback from people in the workforce that we've regularly been keeping a pulse on. But we know that right now, 65% of workers report that mental health issues have directly impacted their ability to work. And that's more than half of the workforce. That's huge. 48% of employees struggle with balancing work and home life. And 73% said they are experiencing burnout in the US. Those are US adults. And it's important to note that that's an extreme. For a majority of working people to feel close to or absolutely burnt out means that they are feeling an extreme sense of exhaustion that could either be physical or emotional, a depletion in motivation, and it's usually a result of prolonged stress or frustration. And so I won't spend a ton of time on burnout. I'm not a burnout expert, but we know a lot more about it from experts in our field and many more studies done, especially since last March. So what does burnout feel like? It's a sense of exhaustion or depletion. When you're burnt out, your capacity to perform is definitely compromised. So is your belief in yourself. And some of the things to look out for are changes in behavior, changes in work habits, and then marked changes in energy levels. That can show up like an inability to concentrate, easily upset or angered, recurring sicknesses, reduced efficiency and energy, lowered levels of motivation, increased errors, headaches, and then more time spent working with less time being accomplished, those diminishing returns. And there are also some hidden cues to burnout that are important to understand as well. Some workers who have recovered from burnout shared what they called, some of the faux truths or the lies that we tell ourselves. And these are things that even when loved ones are pointing it out to them, they couldn't necessarily see them for what they were until they were on the other side of recovering from burnout. So most actually believe these statements to be true. Some of them actually were to a certain extent. And the lie was really just in denying that their current situation was damaging their health and ultimate well-being, and saying these things without pairing them with a realization that things obviously needed to change. So phrases like this: I'm happy to take on more. I'm just tired. I just need a vacation. Everything will be fine after I have a vacation. This too shall pass. How many of us have said things like this to ourselves or others? I'm sure plenty of us have. Saying these things on their own or once in a while doesn't, of course, mean that you're burnt out. It can depend on context fully, and a lot of other factors. But knowing what to look out for is important in case they become a trend, in case you're saying these things often and they're paired with any of the other signs of burnout that we just talked about. So what's contributing to our burnout? As humans, we all have needs. You can see here an adaptation on Maslow's hierarchy of needs. When these needs are not met, especially our base needs lower on the hierarchy, or we have a stressor placed on them, our well-being can most definitely be impacted. Over the past year and a half, many of our most basic needs weren't being met or were more difficult to meet. And this means that we can't move up the hierarchy to focus on a broader sense of well-being. Many of us have just been, as my colleague says, doing the do. We're really trudging through the day-to-day. We're getting done what we need to get done. And we've been somewhat in a basic need fulfillment survival mode. And because of what we talked about in terms of remote work and the way we work, how things are trending to this more integrated work-life remote world, the work-life blur factor is huge in terms of our ability to meet our needs as well. So these two worlds, life and work, are more integrated than ever. We know that our work selves and our life selves are more than ever the same self. They always have been, but we're starting to realize that we are just one human, and sometimes those lines between work and our personal lives aren't as clean as they once were, or even should be. So it's inevitable that these things blur together more now in our very widely adopted remote work situation. Even if you were working remotely from home pre-pandemic, maybe you had an office space to go to or a co-working space that you don't anymore. Maybe your partner joined you working from home. Maybe your kids did too in this past year and a half. Maybe your dog barks at everything. Maybe your kids scream on conference calls. Maybe you get packages like clockwork during your most important meetings and your dog barks and your kids scream at the same time, which is my personal experience. But that is, that's just the way that things are. And there just is this very real blur of work and life that has come to light for most of us. And for most of those who we work with, they see it all. As freelancers and independents, you are not immune to these burnout statistics or work and life load stressors. I think that there's a tendency when we talk about this topic to, yes, talk to the individual, but to talk about it in a way that's this much bigger topic and a much bigger solution set for large organizations. But in fact, studies show that historically, you're more at risk for burnout because of the nature of your work, the nature of your relationships with projects and clients, and balancing it all as a team of one or few. And so the thing when we talk about all of this is that when we talk about well-being at work and boundary setting and all of these things, we are absolutely talking to you, the independent and the freelancer and the contractor. These things apply to you. You are a company of one, and a company of one is still a company of one, or maybe you're a company of few. You have a culture. You have a responsibility to yourself and to as your own employee and as your own leader to care for your well-being. And as with many aspects of freelancing, you may be the only one looking out for your well-being. So it's even more important that you pay attention to this, because no one is throwing resources at you or necessarily asking you how your workload is, how we can better manage it, and how you're doing. So keep in mind that when you work with clients, you are in effect accepting and entering into their culture too. And that's why working with one client versus another can just feel so different sometimes. And it makes it critical that we really understand what works for us, what doesn't work for us, and the same for our clients. In seeking and understanding our own well-being and what works for us, we can think of our whole person well-being in a few different quadrants. So there's foundational well-being, which is truly foundational, bottom of the hierarchy, pyramid stuff. Do I have enough money for food? Really basic functional needs. Purposeful work and career well-being. Am I connected to the work I do in a way that fulfills me? Our physical well-being. Do I feel well in my body? Am I physically well? Emotional well-being and mindfulness. Am I emotionally well? Am I paying attention to my mindset and caring for it when I need to? And then belonging and social well-being. Do I feel like I'm part of a community that invests and accepts me? Are the relationships that I have supportive and nurturing? Do I feel like I belong? Things like that. And the purpose of doing this work and considering these different quadrants as super important building blocks of our whole person well-being is to really create a greater sense of security for ourselves, to cultivate awareness of what makes us feel well or unwell, remove the stigma around mental health, well-being, and generally talking about our feelings in the context of work, which has been a no-no for a long time. It is slowly becoming something that's becoming more widely acknowledged and accepted as a conversation around work, but there's plenty of work to do. Offering compassion to ourselves and to others. So obviously that and strengthening empathy really leads to more understanding and resilience as a person. And then, of course, preventing burnout is ultimately what we absolutely want to do. So what can we do to better care for ourselves? Hold ourselves really accountable to what we know works best for us, keeps our well-being in check, and nurture this culture of one or culture of few. And the truth of that matter is that it really starts with us. You know, we need to ask ourselves, what do we need to do our best work? Think about your experiences with clients, old or new, and think about the best of those experiences. What were a few of the contributing factors? And if you want to drop some of those contributing factors in the chat, we'll discuss them and air them out in real time. But if you think about those really great experiences that left you really fulfilled, like you did really great work, did it have to do with communications? Was it the communications cadence? Was it the style? The way the internal team reached out, kept you engaged? Did they communicate success of the project? How did they give feedback? Did they listen to you, your ideas? Was there two-way communication? Things like that. For tech, was it used to communicate well? What tech did you use for collaboration? What tech did you have that made your work most simple to do? Did you have any tech or not have any tech that you needed to get your work done? I feel like tech and tools can be overlooked when we talk about and think about well-being, but they have a huge impact on how hard or easy it is to do our work. And that ultimately leaves us feeling a certain way about the work that we just did. And it's important to consider. And I see a comment here, as an independent, I often blur the lines of life and work because it's just me and the work has to get done. Yep. It's a very common, concept and phrase and thing that we tell ourselves, because ultimately that there's a truth to that, right? You are the person getting it done and it is on you. There are ways to acknowledge that, though, while also protecting your well-being and setting proper boundaries. And so in thinking about what we need to do our best work, did we have proper timelines, turnaround times, sticking to original timelines? Were they longer engagements where we got to see this like big transformation? Or did it feel really great when we did a quick hitting project that had a big bang? Is that where we find our fulfillment? In the process, specific ways you work together, working styles, rounds of revisions, concepting together, presenting ideas, plugging into more of the client's culture and experience? Or was it the people? Someone commented psychological safety being such an important part of considering all the factors of your well-being. And absolutely. And, working in this way, the people can make a big contribution, either positively or negatively, to our psychological safety. So the way that they make you feel heard, like you belong in this project, you belong in this work, you are part of the team, they respect your work and your way. How did they operate in times where you felt like they were looking out for your psychological safety? How did they pull you into the work, and what made them different in the very best way when you think about those great examples? And this is thinking through this line of questioning is a really good start to the introspective work that we need to do to have a proper retrospective for ourselves from the point of view of well-being and boundary setting. And it really starts with that thought of what works best for us and us alone. So once we have that down, we need to put on our empathy hat and think about what the client needs. What do our clients typically need from us? How can we best recognize this and react in a way that delivers what they need? Sometimes it helps to think of the client through kind of like an individual persona exercise where we personify them and think about them as a real human, because of course that's what they are, and consider what pressures they're under, what their own work-life load might look like, what they're trying to accomplish for their business and why, and how that shows up in the experiences that either feel good or bad for you in working with this client. So now I'll ask you directly this question too. What have you seen from clients in terms of their ultimate need? Like once you got past the brief or the project ask, have you had any ahas when you felt like you really got down to, oh, okay, I was answering to this need for them. This is what they really need from me. And this is how I can be most helpful and plug in and make an impact. So feel free to share those in the comments if you have any thoughts. But in the persona exercise I mentioned, we think of our client point of contact and consider what they think, do, feel, and say so that we can better understand them and start to connect those dots between how things come out and how they're expressed and what's really behind that and how we can best answer to that. And that's a great comment. I think they need understanding. They're under stress too. Yeah, for sure. I provided you with quite a few stats that show that most of us are under some form of stress right now. So extending that empathy to the client is a helpful tool, even for our own resilience in moments of frustration, and being able to take a step back and say, oh yeah, I'm sure they're stressed about this. Let me put myself in their shoes for a second and see if we can, talk this out in a productive way. So in the persona exercise, it's a lot of that, like putting yourself where they're at and trying to think about what is impacting them. They might say things like, I need this yesterday. And what that might really mean is I have too many things on my plate. I have too many urgent initiatives and I don't have enough team or time to support the work. And they might say we're tapped. And this probably means they just need to alleviate pressures from their own team. They might say, we don't know how to do this. So what they're really asking for is your expertise or authority. In the work that we do, I will say that in working with organizations of all sizes, startups to global tens of thousands of employee organizations, communication comes up in every single piece of work that we do as a main challenge. So they might not be great at expressing themselves in the doing of this work. So we don't have to extend them that empathy, but it usually tends to net out in a better work product and a better experience if we're able to take that step and embrace a little bit of empathy and think about what they might be going through or why they're expressing themselves in a certain way. So there's a comment here that says, as a full-time freelancer working with multiple companies, I can say that a lack of feedback or follow-up of where the project ended is my number one frustration. Yeah, totally. And I'm sure you're not alone in that because of some of these other frequently heard comments that I'm sure you hear too alongside of the work about being busy, about how, that's part of the reason that you're there is to give them that lift that they really ultimately need. And so we'll talk about some ways that we can coach ourselves to ask for those things in return, especially if it's part of, at the end of the day, what makes us feel good about our work and coming back to clients to make sure we get that resolve and we truly have like a retrospective conversation where we get to talk about the work and its impact. Someone else commented that oftentimes what a client thinks they need is not really what they need after digging in. Truly taking the time to understand the client makes all the difference. That's also very true. In a lot of cases, they are coming to you because you can be an expert for them. You can be an outside eye And so they might be diagnosing a symptom to a larger problem. And oftentimes they have tried to get at it internally, and for some reason they just can't. And sometimes it literally is the magic of just an outside voice to bring a new perspective to that problem they've been trying to solve. Or it's your very much needed expertise that they can bring to the table and, create a true new option. And so we see that a lot too, coming into organizations that they've gotten to a certain point, but it is likely because they are really busy, or they're just so in it that they can't see the bigger picture. And so that's definitely value that you bring to client relationships as well. And so, ultimately, obviously what they need from you is your best work on time and on brief for you to be able to work independently while also working well with others on the internal team, for some rapid cognition, some quick learning on the fly so you can ultimately give them the lift that they're seeking, and to be able to interpret feedback well. Most of the time, engaging with clients involves a lot of feedback. So it's often a tall order that you're all answering to, and working with many different clients and many different cultures and many different personalities. You're likely already better tuned into empathy than you might think that others are. But it doesn't hurt to stop and consider what else could be going on with these people. If this feels hard, why does it feel hard? And can we address that before it goes too far and we just keep doing the do, even though at the end of the day, we did the work and it doesn't feel good. So we want to obviously avoid that. And we need to address it. And so address that we can in order to combine these two worlds in a way that ultimately leads us to our best work and a well-fulfilled brief for the client. We really need to build confidence and accountability with tools. And so we can think of our toolkit as having 4 main components. So we think of that as communications, boundaries, ownership, and empathy. And so when you think about communication tools, that's really having those conversations and discussing our ideal working style, our preferred lead times and timelines, our communication style, how we like to get together and touch base on projects, how we like to receive feedback. And these are all things that can kind of be like a how we do swap, where you kick things off. And in that kickoff time, that's the best possible moment to talk about all the things that end up getting weird when they're not addressed in the work. And so asking how they like to work, which channels should we use? How should I check for understanding? How do you want to make sure I don't go too far too fast? What's too many pings for you? What is the most helpful way for me to work? Which hours should I be available? These are the hours I'm available. Is that okay with you? So establish what some of these things are off the bat, and that creates a lot fewer instances of weird opportunities throughout, where we're kind of wading through making this work feel better while also trying to really get the hard work done. And establishing some of those tech and tools that we can use to better communicate is part of this compartment, this communications compartment as well, like Slack channels, Zoom chat. What do we use for collaboration and collaborating on pieces, providing comments and feedback? Tools like Mural, which have become really big and so many people working remotely, Google Docs, things like that. So if you have any other things you want to share, like some of the other communications tools you've used and found helpful to either manage your own work or work with clients, feel free to share in the comments for everyone to take a look at too. There's a comment here. I've started using the automated do not disturb function for smartphone notifications. Very reasonable and contributes to a much better night's sleep. Yes, for sure. And in that boundary component over here, that's definitely part of what we need to think about is what is sacred to us? Is it time? Is it time that we don't want to be disturbed? And I have a nice little boundary planner tool for you as a freebie and takeaway. for you to really get down on paper what my sacred boundaries are, how stress shows up for me when these boundaries are crossed, and how you can really outline your own plan for better looking at your boundaries on a regular basis. And, really thinking about those things, what are okay and what's okay for me to be flexible about? What's just a no? And boundaries are so different for every single person on this earth. We have a lot of commonalities on like major things, but at my own organization, every one of our team members filled out a version of this boundary planner that I'm sharing with you. And I can confirm just how different they are and just how different people we all are, but we all work really harmoniously together every single day because we have ownership tools in place and can communicate our boundaries well. So developing ownership tools is really important, like the do not disturb function on mobile that the commenter mentioned. It's really finding those tools for how we stick to our boundaries so that we don't get frustrated with one another or with our work. Off time app is a great one that alerts us at a previously determined time when we need to log off and end our work day. It's like our mental cue for transition between that work-life blur world. And finding these other opportunities to really stick to what's important to us. And, for example, for me, I have a hard stop at 4 p.m. on my calendar. I know that if I get on the road any later than that, it's a domino effect of baby meltdowns and traffic and a commute that puts me in a really negative headspace by the time I get home and hang out with my family. And whatever thing I did for an extra 15 to 20 minutes before I left isn't worth what happens to me mentally after I get home, because it builds. With enough instances of that in any human, we're all human, it builds resentment. It makes me feel less refreshed the next day. And those are some of the things that can just snowball into, burnout and all the other things that we were talking about. So knowing that my team is aware of that hard stop and doesn't schedule meetings or important things over that time, I use my calendar and I share that with every single one of my team members and my clients so they know that I'm not available after that time. And that's just something important for my own personal boundaries to respect. And then the last compartment is empathy. And so we just talked about that a whole lot. Just considering the persona exercise for clients, what they are saying, doing, thinking, and feeling as a result of their own life load. How can we better read the room and work well together? So I believe that Kevin shared the link for you all. Yep, there it is. The free boundary planner for freelancers and independents. There's an I want this button on the session page. And so this planner is really your personal ownership buddy. And it looks a little something like this. It's prettier in the actual version that you will get. But this is just an excerpt, and it really guides you through doing that introspective work of putting to paper and thinking about what is sacred to me in terms of my work-life blend. What is my preferred communication style? What really sets me off when, I receive feedback in this way versus that way? I do my best work when these factors are involved, which is sort of what we were thinking about in those exercises of our greatest memories of our client work. I feel best when I can address a sensitive topic in this way. I recognize overwhelm in myself when I XYZ. Those can be physical, things that we're feeling in response to stress, emotional, taking them out on our loved ones. Comes out in a lot of different ways for all of us. And then identifying, I feel overwhelmed when others or my clients do this. And really getting those things down is a very helpful exercise to demystify what can feel like a lot of mental noise that's really hard to navigate. And then how we reinforce those boundaries and take ownership over them is defining how we're going to use those tools and develop our toolkit to make sure that we are setting ourselves up for success. We know what our boundaries are. We know it's sacred to us. And we open ourselves up to having a more confident conversation with clients on the front end about how we can best work together. I try to walk away at 5:30 p.m. Try is the word. Yeah, it's a great point. It doesn't always happen. Our boundaries are there to guide us in making our rule decisions throughout the day, not the exception. You want those beyond 5:30 instances to slowly shift to be the exception. And it's not perfect. You won't always nail it, and that's okay. That's part of this. These are just a couple additional well-being tools to look into. I'm sure you've heard of a lot of them, if not all of them, but they are some B2C options. So they're very affordable for independents or parties of one to engage with. And they're really focused on a progressive approach to caring for your well-being through meditation. There's app-based therapy with Talkspace, and then Headspace has a lot of meditations and some SOS exercises in the case of sudden meltdowns, and just some really cool well-being resources for you. So in terms of what's next, as we think about this journey of well-being, a few things to keep in mind. Do use your boundary planner and revisit it regularly. This can be something that really guides your day, that helps center you when you're feeling stressed, and can be edited over time if new things emerge as things that are really important to you in different seasons of life. It's a living, breathing thing. Feel a greater sense of control over your well-being and a sense of empathy and understanding for others. Think of the impact you can make by putting prevention strategies in place and just being more aware. And then say what you mean and what's best for you. Stand up for your well-being. This is a conversation that is only normalized when we have it. And so once you gain that confidence and understanding what works best for you, there's no harm in standing up for that. It may save you a pretty painful experience if you're so far off from having that conversation with a client that they aren't even willing to engage with it. And as always, give yourself a break. Well-being is definitely a journey. It's not always perfect. Boundaries aren't always perfectly maintained. And it's really about trying and practicing so that we build up a muscle memory and well-being becomes a strength for each and every one of us. So that is the goal. And I appreciate all your comments so far, but I wanted to open it up for a little bit of Q&A if we had anyone else that wanted to ask any questions or last minute comments, and see if we have a couple minutes to answer a few.
Thank you so much, Amanda. This is great. And it's great that you were able to catch a lot of the questions as we went through. And I think that's, at least for me, that's helpful because it's, if I try to remember what the question was I asked 5 minutes ago, I can't. So that's really helpful and very much appreciate that. So there's a couple other ones here. Well, I wanted to comment first on the, the communication piece. That's my, I had 45 years in corporate PR, and that included responsibility for corporate communications and included employee communications, internal communications. And I can't, when you talk about that being one of the four quadrants in that wheel, communication is so important. And some of it's a basic tenet of good public relations, right? Is, keeping people informed, being transparent, realizing sometimes things are confidential, you can't share everything, but keeping people informed, because in the absence of information, people make stuff up, right? So that's never a good thing, and that leads to more and more stress. So I think, from the standpoint of effective communication, and going to that comment somebody made about, the most frustrating thing for them is they don't really get any feedback, right? They don't know if their client is happy with what they did or didn't. They might send them a check or pay them on PayPal or whatever, but did they really were they really happy? So feedback is important too. Okay, so there's a couple of them here. This one kind of goes to your section on clients. Do you see the clients being more understanding about respecting our boundaries as freelancers, knowing that workers, including us, are more stressed these days?
Yes. So there has been a trend of clients being more understanding of just well-being in general, and starting to ask the questions of simply, how are you? That question we started with. And even further, are you okay? What do you need? normalizing a lot more of those questions in one-on-one conversations, reviews, and getting beyond just, the work in the regular conversations that we have. I think that the world has shown the world of work, the outside world has shown the world of work, how important empathy and a conversation that's broadened beyond the work at hand is. And when we're not doing that as organizations, it really shows up in negative ways. Speaking of PR, it shows up in really negative and very public and very loud ways for organizations now. So this idea of having yourself right internally before you go external with anything is becoming the norm. And we're getting a lot of clients who are coming to us trying to figure out how they do that best, how they remain authentic to themselves, how they are more empathetic to their employees, and how they care for them. And they are really opening up. They might not have it perfect when they start, but they are opening up to the possibility of having more of these open conversations, being open to well-being in general.
Yeah, I think that's so important, and the whole employee of going beyond employee communications to employee care, and just having that empathy. And again, I retired from that crazy corporate world after 45 years about 2 years ago, so I wasn't there when the pandemic came. I've kept in touch with my former employees and so forth, and most of whom are still working from home, right? So they're all freelancers in a sense too. So another question. This one relates to just, I guess, the focus on, I would say, focus on support. Do you see businesses, including small businesses, focusing more on mental health as a part of their HR related services? I mean, everybody knows HR is, payroll and employee information, but is there more focus on this area?
Yes. Yeah. And there has been a shift in the perception of HR and its function within organizations, especially within the past couple of years, but definitely in the past year and a half amidst the pandemic and amidst conversations around, like just what's going on in the world. And so we have seen HR departments become a lot more than that, very like nuts and bolts functional piece of things, and kind of the internal people police. That's really not the way that a lot of HR functions are operating now. And it's a lot more of a focus on being the people and the culture people. And, I feel like we definitely did this with quite a few clients over the past year and a half, but I know a lot of other organizations have too, is send out surveys asking how their people are. And so a lot of the responses we've seen is to do with wanting more mental health resources. You can find it in research out there all over the place that employees are asking for more resources beyond the traditional offerings that organizations provide. So we're seeing a lot more of an appetite from employees and their willingness to express it and ask for it, and organizations responding to that because there's more in the marketplace now. There are a lot more app-based, easy to access ways to provide mental health to employees at large and smaller organizations. Some of those apps that I mentioned, like Calm, Talkspace, Headspace, there are a couple other ones too that provide like tiered options for different size organizations. And it's definitely becoming something that's more accessible because of demand and supply starting to work together and introduce more options in that space.
Yeah. And I'll say, knowing what your employees think, and employee opinion surveys are very important. And, one of the things I learned early on is if you're going to do one, you better report on it. Not only we were very much focused on number one, really trying to get people to participate, and hard thing to overcome sometimes is they think, well, they're going to trace those answers back to me and I'm going to get in trouble for saying I don't like my boss or whatever. But and those things take time, but those are very important. And not only reporting what the results are, being very candid about it, but also doing something about it and saying, okay, last year you said this, and here's what we are doing to address that issue. So, so I put up here, you've got your LinkedIn page and hashtag humanize work, which I love that. I just want to remind folks the free boundary planner for freelancers. So again, if you're looking on the talk page or the presentation page, there's a button there that says I want this, and if you just click on that, it will allow you to download that document. So one more question for me, Amanda, I guess, and it kind of relates to sort of a theme throughout this, talking about the growing community of freelancers, and a lot more people are going into business for themselves. Some of it, some have been forced to because they were let go or furloughed or laid off or whatever the terminology is, and finding that they enjoy it. And then at the same time, the question was, well, once the pandemic is over, whenever that is, will businesses return to normal? And I think just like they're revisiting, their infrastructure and their brick and mortar, saying, we like people working from home. They like working from home. Their productivity is going up, and whatever. We may start outsourcing more of, for example, our human resources services. So I guess I would ask you, has Living HR, are you all seeing that happening? Where because not everybody's an expert in what you do. You might be an HR professional or whatever, but you aren't an expert in the things you're talking about. Are you seeing, more and more companies, large and small, reaching out to you for that support?
Yes. Yeah. So we have been, we've been seeing that, and very much so, this departure from the before times for work. And truly something that I say sometimes is that we sort of can't unring this bell of the time we're in now. So much has been revealed and changed in a way that is unchangeable for the world of work, and the role of employee and leader and the relationships that we had. We have come so far in this very fast manner in the past year and a half that I think we all have changed a lot with that pace of change. Like we all went through something together. So it can't be, we won't be going back to how things were. It's fundamentally changed. Like the world of work has fundamentally changed. We see it in our, clients we work with plants in middle America to the most progressive tech companies we work with. They are all focused on this more progressive way of work in a way that they didn't even consider before. I had a conversation recently with a really traditional CEO at a manufacturing organization who said, we will never do remote work. We're not going to do it. And then we were forced to do remote work. And now the questions he has are not, why, didn't we do this earlier? That's one. But what else can we do, virtually? What else aren't we thinking of? What else did I have my blinders on about? And so it's a really, just encouraging way of thinking about the future of work that we're hearing from our clients that are all so very different. But they are all eyeing a different way of working, and we won't go back. It won't be the same.
Yeah, great. Well, listen, Amanda, this has been wonderful. Your information is so insightful, and again, just sort of fits in so nicely with the rest of our theme and the work that your organization, Living HR, does. Just encourage everybody to go to your LinkedIn page and connect with you all. Thank you so much for your time today. Any closing thoughts before I let you go and make a few final announcements?
Well, I would just say, be kind to yourselves, be well, take some time. And, I get nothing out of you using this boundary planner. It's only for you. But, just really take the time to care for yourself in these times, and know that it's okay to advocate for yourself too. As a freelancer, as an independent, you are a human that is worthy of care. And I know that it can be hard to take time for that, but it's really important. And I think you'll see the benefits as you put time into it. So thank you for having me. Thank you for listening and engaging. I really appreciate it.
Thanks so much, Amanda. And you're right. As our founder of Freelance Business Week, Emily Leach, says, we're wonderful humans. So we need to remember that. So thanks so much for your time today, Amanda. Very much appreciate it.
Thanks, Kevin.
All right, folks. Well, thank you so much for joining us today for our presentation from Living HR. Just a quick run through what else is still coming up. Next on the agenda for the Tampa, Kansas City team is Social Proof, how to get it and how to use it from Kimberly Beer. Then we have a dear friend of mine who shares my profession of public relations, Cami Hughes, APR, founder and CEO of Zoetica Media. She's doing a session on creating a customer journey funnel to increase sales, something you don't often hear PR folks talk about. I consider Cami to be the social media guru, so you don't want to miss that. And then we had a late add-on, and this takes place at 6 p.m. Eastern Time, 5 p.m. Central Time. We have joining us Jonelle Hine, who's the district director for the SBA South Florida office, and she's going to be talking about SBA resources to support your business. So we're very excited about that. Let me leave you with just one thought, and this is a very organic event, and coming out of just our sessions yesterday, we were talking about efforts underway to regulate the freelance industry and some legislation in Congress and even at some states. So we've started up this organization called legionofreelancers.org. You see the URL there. You won't find a lot there yet, except it's to basically sign up. It's /who's in. Just provide your name. But we're trying to create a huge unified community of freelancers to talk about the issues and that I just mentioned and how they affect those of us who are in that independent workforce. So again, just share that with you and feel free to go to that site and sign up, and you'll be receiving additional information. So again, thanks so much for your time today. Appreciate it. And stay tuned for my good friend Julie introducing our next speaker. See you later on today. Thanks now.